Last night in Soho. The movie starts with Eloise Turner dancing in a newspaper dress. She has dreams of becoming a fashion designer just like her late mother. She picks up a picture with two women in it and looks up to see that there is a woman standing behind her in the mirror. It is revealed that the woman is one of the women in the picture. However, the woman in the mirror is not real and she disappears soon after someone calls out to Ellie. She runs down the stairs and meets with her grandmother, Peggy, who hands her a letter. She's excited as she opens the letter because she's going to London. In the next scene, Ellie is packing her belongings in preparation for the trip as Peggy walks in and picks up the picture she was looking at earlier. Peggy then tells her about her time in London. She offers Ellie the photo to take with her, but Ellie refuses. Peggy then tries to warn Ellie about London, but Ellie tries to convince her she can handle it. The next day, Ellie leaves her room to go on her trip. She mutters the word bye to her mother's ghost in the mirror and goes to the taxi to leave. At the last minute, Peggy hands her a package, which she later discovers is the picture from the previous day. When Ellie finally arrives in London, she takes a taxi to her destination. On the way, the taxi driver starts to make offensive comments. She gets suspicious and tells him to drop her off at a store. When she gets in, she watches him from a spot to see if he leaves. She picks up a can of soda and pays for it, and when she comes back out, she sees that the taxi has gone. Ellie walks to her hostel while trying to pull her luggage up the stairs. She encounters a young man called John who offers his assistance, but she politely refuses. She goes to her room and knocks at the door. The door is opened by a girl called Jocasta. Once inside, Jocasta hands her a glass of wine, then lights a cigarette as they make small talk. In the next scene, Jocasta is seen talking to three other girls. Ellie walks in and Jocasta introduces her to the girls. She makes fun of her outfit and mentions the fact that both of their mothers are dead. When the girl asks how Ellie lost her mother, she tells him that her mother killed herself, and they sympathize. Jocasta gets jealous and also tells the girls that the same thing happened to her mum, and the girls also sympathize with her. Ellie then walks over to the refrigerator to put her can of soda in it, but she sees that it's filled with items that bear Jocasta's name. Jocasta then walks over and picks up a Sharpie and writes Ellie's name on it. The scene changes, and the five girls are seen going out to a bar with Ellie feeling out of place. John also walks into the bar and salutes her, to which she responds. Afterwards, Ellie walks away from the girls and goes off to another area of the bar and looks in the mirror. In the mirror, she sees a man looking at her, but when she turns around, he's disappeared. Ellie then goes into the ladies' room. While in there, a girl comes in and Jocasta is once again making fun of her. Ellie leaves the bar, and on the other side of the road, she notices a silver-haired man who smiles at her, but she looks away. Afterwards, though, she's seen wearing a smile as she turns back around. In the next scene, she's lying on her bed when Jocasta stumbles in with a man. Ellie leaves the room and comes downstairs. She takes a seat in the lounge where a boy approaches her and criticizes her choice of music, but is shut down by John. When the boy leaves, John introduces himself to Ellie. John shows her the can of soda that he took from the refrigerator with her name on it, and she lets him have it and continues her music. The next morning, Ellie wakes up in the lounge and finds out that she's overslept. She runs all the way to class, but gets there to find the class is filled up. She then spots John, who offers her a free seat, and she takes it. However, she was unaware of the attendance being taken, and asks the professor what the question was, making Jocasta chuckle. After her classes, she receives a call from Peggy, who asks her about her experience so far in London. Ellie lies and tells her it's going well. While taking the call, she notices a poster on the ground renting out a bedsit for women and picks it up. In the next scene, she's seen going to Soho to check out the bedsit. When she gets to the place, she rings the doorbell and meets with Mrs. Collins, who lets her in and gives her a set of rules. Mrs. Collins shows her the room and asks her if she was ever in any sort of trouble. As they sit down to have tea, Mrs. Collins asks her if she'd be able to afford the rent and asks for 2 months' deposit up front. Ellie then moves in with Mrs. Collins. She unpacks and then prepares to go to bed. She switches off the light and puts on some music, but the light from the sign outside her room does not allow her to go to sleep, so she turns around and pulls the cover over her head, but somehow falls into a dreamlike trance. In the dream, she walks through a tunnel and into the streets before arriving in front of Café de Paris, where the doorman let her in. When she walks in, a steward takes her coat, but she notices that her actions are being mirrored by a blonde woman named Sandie. Sandie walks down the stairs into the hall when a man approaches her and asks her to join him and his friends. She retorts and says she wants to meet the owner, to which he replies that he is the owner, but she doubts him. Sandie walks to the bar and talks with the bartender. She asks about the owner and tells him that she wants to be the headline act, even though she's new. The bartender tells her to talk to a man called Jack, who manages several ladies. She walks over to the end of the bar and Jack walks over to her. She introduces herself and tells him of her intentions, and he tells her she must be willing to work her way up. He asks her how good she is at dancing, and then she proceeds to the center of the hall and they both dance. He then offers her a gig, to which she agrees, but the man that approached her earlier comes up again and asks for a dance. Sandie refuses, and when Jack comes to her rescue, a fight breaks out. Then Jack grabs her and they both run away. They go off to make out, and then outside the cafe, people start to notice. Jack drives her home and asks to see her the next day. Sandie goes up to her room where Ellie stays and goes to sleep. Ellie reaches out to touch the sleeping Sandie, and her alarm goes off, bringing her dream to an end. In the next scene, John and Ellie are seen looking at a design Ellie made from the dress that Sandie wore in her dream. Jocasta walks up to her and makes a rude comment. When she leaves school, John tells her that he likes her design. He asks her if she has any plans later that night, and she replies that she does. At night, she falls into a dream-like trance again, where Jack is running late, but he apologizes and takes her to an audition. She proves to be an excellent singer and leaves both Jack and the owner of the place in awe. Again, Ellie is woken up by her alarm. Later, Ellie dyes her hair just like Sandie's, and she sends the picture to Peggy. Ellie's lecturer looks at Ellie's design, gives expert advice, and then compliments her hair. Afterwards, she goes off to a boutique to try the clothes Sandie wore in her dream. She notices a pub and goes to ask for a job, but she's sent to the owner, who asks some questions. Ellie notices the silver-haired man she'd seen earlier observing her. When she walks out of the pub, the man follows her and asks about her mother because she looks familiar, to which she replies that her mother is dead and leaves. She walks in and Mrs. Collins does not recognize her at first because of her hair. Ellie prepares for bed, and in her dream she's sitting amongst an audience that is waiting for a singer to perform. When the curtains rise, she's disappointed to find that Sandie is not the one singing. Ellie gets up and walks over to a dressing room where Sandie is lighting a cigarette. She smashes the mirror with a picture on it and hears a knock on the door. Jack is on the other side and takes her with him. He introduces her to a man who asks her out for a drink. When Sandie protests and walks away, Jack follows and tries to convince her otherwise. Ellie runs into a room. In the room, Sandie's sleeping on the bed. The man that asked her out for a drink walks out of the restroom and attempts to touch her. Ellie screams that he should leave her alone, and when the man looks up at Ellie, her alarm goes off. She wakes up scared and tries to turn off the alarm, but the man grabs her hand and says he knows she's not asleep. Her alarm goes off again, and she wakes up for real. In the next scene, when she goes to class, she remembers Sandie's life and rips the outfit she had made. Her lecturer tries to convince her not to do it. Later in the day, John comes to her work to buy a drink and asks after her. He also asks about where she currently stays and offers to listen to her. She then receives a call from Peggy, who says Ellie doesn't call her anymore, and Ellie confesses that she's now working at a pub. After the call, the silver-haired man walks up to her and calls her by her full name, Eloise, and he hands her over the design that she left at the pub and walks away. Later on, she asks her employer if she believes in ghosts, and her employer's reply is no. A scared Ellie goes home and prepares to sleep. Then her trance begins, with Jack walking in and dragging her away. Sandie looks upset as Jack tells her to do her job, and she walks in dancing and soon encounters a man who takes her to his table and offers her champagne. Sandie goes on to dance more times, and men approach to ask for her name, but she gives them a fake name. But the last man she meets asks for her real name and tells her to leave the life she lives. Not long after, Ellie wakes up in a fright. However, it's still night, and then she looks up in the ceiling mirror and sees Sandie. She panics and runs into her bathroom, but when she summons the courage to go back inside, it's already daytime. She closes the door and goes back into her bathroom, but when she opens it this time, she sees the ghosts of men, making her scream in fright. In the next scene, she goes over to school and is approached by John, who asks her out, and she agrees. They go to a Halloween party, and Jocasta hands them a drink with a suspicious smile on her face. Ellie and John dance while having fun until Ellie starts to see the ghosts. She gets scared and runs out to take air, but still sees Sandie and Jack. John follows her and offers his help. They both go to the bedsit where Ellie stays, and while they make out, she begins to get flashbacks of when a man murders Sandie with a knife, and John gets scared and is chased away by Mrs. Collins. The next day, Ellie asks Mrs. Collins if anyone died in her room, to which she gives a vague reply. She tries to go back upstairs but sees the ghost of Jack. Then she changes her mind and goes to school. John looks at her weirdly. However, while working on her dress, she starts to see ghosts. She runs out of class and into the streets, but sees ghosts everywhere she looks. She runs to a police station and tells the police of how she had witnessed a murder from the 1960s, and they think that she's mad. She decides to go and find evidence on her own in the library, but finds nothing. Then John comes in to hand her things, and she tells him of her visions and how she suspects the silver-haired man of killing her. He offers his help and leaves, but she starts to see ghosts again. While trying to run from the ghosts and protect herself, she nearly stabs Jocasta, but is stopped by John. She then runs away from the scene and spots the ghost of Sandie, who she followed. She follows till she touches Sandie and is pushed to the ground. When she stands up, she sees the silver-haired man, who she thinks is Jack, and she follows him. He goes to the pub where she works and asks him about Sandie while recording the conversation. She tells him that she knows what he did to Sandie, and he agrees that Sandie was responsible for what happened to her. The man goes out of the bar to leave and gets hit by a car. Ellie finds out his name isn't Jack. Afterwards, Ellie goes to a call station to call Peggy, who promises to come pick her up and take her home. She decides to follow John home instead. John drives her to her place to ask Mrs. Collins for help. Ellie tells Mrs. Collins that she's going back home, but promises to pay her back. Mrs. Collins calms her down and offers her tea. Mrs. Collins tells her she knows she has been seeing ghosts in her room, and tells her that she died in that room, and Ellie realizes that Mrs. Collins is Sandie. Sandie tells her about how she killed Jack and the men. Ellie tries to comfort her and apologizes for getting her in trouble with the police. Mrs. Collins tells her it's no problem since the police think that she's mad, and she wouldn't be telling anybody else since her tea had been poisoned. Meanwhile, John keeps ringing the doorbell and is later let in by Sandie, who stabs him when he comes in. Ellie comes closer to protest, but Sandie cuts her with a knife and tries to kill her off completely. Meanwhile, Ellie has started a fire in the house. Ellie crawls up the stairs to escape from Mrs. Collins into a room upstairs where she gets ambushed by the ghosts of dead men who Mrs. Collins had murdered. The dead men protest to Ellie to kill her. Sandie sees the dead men in the room and tells Ellie she didn't plan for this life. Sandie tries to commit suicide, but Ellie tries to stop her. But she chases Ellie out of the burning house. Ellie crawls to John, who's still conscious. Luckily, the fire department breaks through the door just in time to save Ellie while Sandie stays in the burning house, waiting to die. In the next scene, a group of models show off some brand new clothing which Ellie has designed. John was among the crowd who cheers them. Everyone around congratulates Eloise for her incredible work. Peggy and John come to congratulate her too. She turns around and sees the ghost of Sandie kissing her goodbye.